Hello and welcome to this download from Blackwell Online. My name is George Miller, and my guest today is Tom Vanderbilt, author of Traffic. Tom's book is a fascinating exploration of why we drive the way we do and what it says about us. Read it, and you'll find out if your parking strategy mimics that of the condor or the barn owl, why Belgians make less safe drivers than their neighbours the Dutch, and why almost all New Yorkers jaywalk, but very few citizens of Copenhagen do. Tom presents a compelling case for viewing traffic as a subject fully worthy of our attention. But what, I wondered, had got him thinking about it in the first place?
There was a moment I describe in the book, and it really is sort of a stupid thing in retrospect, but I was out driving on a highway and came to a merge situation in which two lanes were going into one. And it's a very long story. I won't go fully into detail, but I changed my behavior slightly about the way I merge, and I began to think about it a little bit more, and it seemed that, especially in the United States, I think that these merge points were such sort of choke points of hostility and raid. Study even found that they were the number one source of driver stress, according to one survey, were quote-unquote merging difficulties. I just wondered, as someone who writes a lot about design, is this something, could a better system for merging be designed? Then I just started to wonder about traffic psychology and all these assumptions I had about the way things worked on the road. And basically, doing a little bit of research, I realized it was really only the cliched tip of the iceberg, and saw that there was such a huge, vast, almost secret literature out there of traffic engineering and people who really work on these problems that I felt hadn't really made it to the light of day in a way that I thought was quite interesting. And so that's how I basically got into it, very accidental.
I was really struck by that fact, just how much human ingenuity is expended on studying traffic and trying to devise systems to cope with the problems that we humans encounter when we get behind the wheel.
Yeah, and it's, of course, an ancient problem, and people, these so-called traffic archaeologists who have studied Pompeii or ancient Rome, have seen everything from, not just schemes to manage the timing of traffic. For example, putting a ban on daytime cart and chariot entries into the city and making them come in at night, which then led to the unintended consequence of people not being able to sleep. But then, physical engineering such as bollards. I mean, there are bollards in Pompeii. People have studied the wear on curbstones to see which streets were one way, which way were vehicles turning. So in all aspects, traffic, even enforcement, not being able to drive at a certain speed with a horse through a town, all these issues are sort of ancient in a way, but of course, as mobility becomes more, the world is becoming more mobile every day, and people are shifting to all sorts of technologies, particularly the car, which is the main thing here. But these issues become just that much more pressing. But they've sort of been with us forever. But as the world becomes more crowded and we're all wanting to go more places, they really take on a new importance, I think.
I mean, you say they've been with us forever, but in fact, one of the things which came out of your book to me was the fact that we didn't evolve to travel at high speed in motorized vehicles. I mean, you say at one point, traffic messes with our heads, we are too human and we are not human enough. And that seemed to me to capture very neatly this problem that we have, that we don't get the usual cues and signals that we have in normal social interaction when we get behind the wheel.
It's a very good point, and it raises a number of questions, one of which it's always suggested, well, a lot of the rage out there, the hostility perhaps comes because we lack these traditional human signals for contact. So the things that we wouldn't do in public, we then see people doing in the road, arguably because of this anonymity. So people suggest things like, well, if we could only have more signaling systems that would send human sort of messages, winks, nods, you can apologize through your blinkers some sort of way. So that's one argument, but the counter-argument is that people often fail to use the existing signals they have, and number two, that at sort of a high-speed motorway environment particularly, you don't necessarily want people engaging in more information. It sort of functions better as an anonymous flowing system. You get into city environments when you're moving at slower speeds, and this is where you really sense where that human stuff has been lost, and these interesting experiments in places like the Netherlands, which have become quite famous, do rely more on these things like eye contact, being able to engage more in almost than traffic space. And the argument there is that if you could, when those things take over, if it's all done correctly with the proper engineering, you may be able to eliminate most or all of the signs that have been put up, often just through rote standardization, and people have forgotten why they were actually put up in the first place.
And I was intrigued that animal behavior specialists had found human parking behavior of interest.
Well, I mean, parking behavior is a quite fascinating thing, as all driving behavior, and a number of interesting psychological studies out there. For example, that people were found to take longer vacating their parking space at a shopping mall parking lot when someone was waiting for the space than when someone was not waiting. And they were asked in surveys whether they would do this behavior, and they said no, but that's something where, again, with traffic, often our better instincts don't take over, and you do find these sort of other behaviors coming in. But people who have studied, wildlife biologists have actually studied parking, and it sort of fits into this thing called optimal foraging. How do animals find food? What are the best search strategies? And if you think about an animal looking for food, going to a large crowded shopping environment or even a city, these same questions sort of pop up. Is it better to sort of circle endlessly looking for the quote-unquote best space, or do you sort of grab the first available space, even if it's on the far sort of periphery of the parking lot? And because in the animal world, these things are of key importance. Obviously, if you don't eat, you don't survive. It's not quite as essential in parking, but I suppose to many people it is. So again, and I should just conclude with the thought that parking is another one of these, in a way, secret sources of traffic. It's been estimated that vast amounts of traffic on any urban street at a particular time, and particularly in U.S. cities, are simply people looking for parking. And there's been some talk if we could change the way this is priced, that this would send more people into lots. Anyway, this is key to conquering any traffic issue is figuring out the parking.